Hello biology students, this is Dr. Saleh in part 2 of chapter 16. There are 4 events which are involved in a sensation. Event 1 is stimulation of the sensory receptor. Event 2, transduction of the stimulus. Event 3, generation of a nerve impulse. And event 4 is translation or integration of sensory input. We'll learn about each event in more detail. Number 1 is stimulation of the sensory receptor. We always start with the receptor. It will receive the sensation. An appropriate stimulus must occur within the receptor's receptive field. Let me jump to the next slide and I'll come back here. What's a receptive field? Each sensory receptor possesses a peripheral receptive field, which is a body region where stimulation elicits a response. We think about it like a Wi-Fi range. If you are at the hack, you can use the hack Wi-Fi, but once you go out and you get away in the street, you won't be able to use it. You're out of range. This is the same for all sensory receptors. Sensory receptor can be a sensory neuron with encapsulated nerve endings, or can be just a dendrite, or it can be a specialized cell, and we'll learn about the different types of receptor in a later recording. All sensory receptors possess some properties. We already mentioned the peripheral receptive field. They also exhibit a high degree of excitability. They are easily excitable, and they possess selectivity, which means they are selective for each type of sensation. As we said, we have receptors for pain, for touch, receptors for temperature. A receptor for pain cannot carry information for touch, and so on. The second event is transduction of the stimulus. The sensory receptor will convert the energy in a stimulus, which means the stimulus information, into a graded potential. This is considered as the electrical response of a sensory receptor to a stimulus. And if we remember from before, a graded potential has variable amplitude that varies with the strength of the stimulus. And it's not propagated like a nerve impulse. It's only for short-term distance only. Once threshold is reached, one or more action potential can be generated in the sensory neuron. The third event in sensation is generation of nerve impulses or conduction. When the sum of graded potentials reaches threshold, nerve impulses will be propagated in first-order neurons. Starting from the receptor to the final destination in the brain, most somatosensory signals will travel into 3 stations: first-order, second-order, and third-order neurons. It's like a team of 3 players that will help each other so the sensory signal can reach out to the central nervous system. Let's take a hint about each of them. First-order neurons, they conduct impulses from peripheral somatic sensory receptors, which means cutaneous receptors of the skin, or from proprioceptors, to spinal cord or brain stem. So for each neuron, we need to know where it starts, where it ends. They are unipolar in structure. The cell body lies in a ganglion, either dorsal root or cranial ganglion. Impulses from face, mouth, teeth, and eyes are transmitted by cranial nerves, and impulses from back of the head, neck, and the rest of the body are transmitted by spinal nerves. Then, these neurons are done with their job and will synapse with second-order neurons. The second-order neurons have cell bodies that reside in dorsal gray horn or medullary nuclei. that transmit sensory impulses from the brainstem, where their axons decassate. Decassate means cross to the opposite side of the body, before ascending to the thalamus or to the cerebellum. Then they will synapse with third order neurons. So in this picture we can see we start with the receptors. This is the first order neuron. It will synapse with second order neuron. The second order neuron will carry the impulses to the thalamus or to the cerebellum, and it will synapse with the third order neuron. Third order neurons have cell bodies that reside in the thalamus. This is the third order neurons. And they will carry these impulses to the primary somatosensory area in the cerebral cortex, in the post-central gyrus on the same side. Only then it will result in conscious perception of the sensation. The fourth and the last event of a sensation is integration of sensory input or translation, when a particular region of the central nervous system will integrate a number of sensory impulses and will result in the conscious sensation or perception. Most of this integration takes place in the cerebral cortex of the brain after passing through the thalamus. We already mentioned before that the thalamus acts as a relay station for sensations before it reaches to the brain. And we'll pick up in next recording.